Everyone experiences adversity in this world, and that's especially true in the beekeeping world. We had the privilege of having Ian Steppler on one of our stream team live beekeeping chats recently, and he gave us some great words of wisdom and great thoughts when it comes to overcoming adversity in his beekeeping operation. I'll put the link to the original video in the description below. Brian from Castle Hives, Greg from Nature's Image Farm, and myself really enjoyed our time that evening with Ian Steppler. I think you'll enjoy these comments as well. Thought I'd just take a few minutes out of that video and share these nuggets of information with you. I hope you enjoy it. Let's go. So yeah, I've kind of been following your story this year, and we've had John briefly a few times, and we talked about the almost tragic beginning to the year with the temperature variations, the severe cold, and then the flooding, and just man, you I guess sometimes Mother Nature will pay you back if you just endure, if you endure through some of those hard times.
Yeah, tough weather, and it was especially tough because it was during some critical, very critical period of honeybee development. When like I had them in winter, and they were set up in winter, and they're doing what they do through winter, and they come out and start to develop into spring, and Mother Nature just threw us storm after storm after storm, and just pulled winter for an extra month, just like that. And that's that's where the rubber meets the road for a honeybee colony coming out of winter, is that point of time, that shift into spring. And we had a lot of trouble trying to shift them. There's some guys that actually left their colonies in the shed to try to wait out the storm. And a lot of those colonies just timed out on them. They just, end of the rope, right? So it was a very tough winter we went through. But we got through because we focused on quite a few basics there, just the basics of development, and we got them through. And I knew through the entire time that there's opportunity waiting, because we grain farm too, and we just had a heck of a time trying to get this crop in, and we were late and staggered seeding. We had to reseed lots because of bugs and weather and everything, and we were pushed right to the crop insurance deadline. And I knew that crop was coming later, so if I could just keep my bees going, I just had to hold them together. All I had to do is hold them together, and if I could hold them together, get them into nice weather, because surely it was going to come. Like eventually it will come. If I could just hold them there, it could skyrocket me right into the honey flow. And sure enough, I was lucky enough that happened. So I capitalized on a very short but intense honey flow, and brought a lot of honey in, and then immediately back into winter preparation. And here we are right now. It's just kind of like a whiplash this year. I'm just kind of not even, it doesn't even feel like October. It feels like October, but personally, it feels like we should be September still, because we're still combining and stuff. It's just really very unusual.
It's just been fun watching your story. It's been, I think, I've seen some of the comments, even when folks have commented on here. We've done some of the live stream segments before that, people are just kind of, I don't know if the word is ached with you, but it's been emotional for people going through it. Not as emotional as you are, obviously, but it's been just you can sense the emotion in your voice. And, we talked to Jose that night. I think he came on for a little while during that chat, if I'm not mistaken, and he had a similar experience with the flooding. And so we just appreciate the tenacity, which is a word that Bob uses, I think, tenacity, that you have to keep going. And it really, tenacity, I think, applies to everyone in this beekeeping game that we're in. Any type of farming, you got to be tenacious in what you're doing. You can't just quit when the times get tough. And so we do appreciate
situations like that. I call them experience building exercises, right?
Absolutely.
You can't learn until you actually go through the process. And if you're smart enough and you watch and you take in everything that's going on at that time, and you can learn from what's going on, then it helps you be prepared for the next time. Maybe you're going to encounter it. So you always got to take it as a learning exercise as we move forward. And that's what makes us good beekeepers, if we can react and act and then anticipate a little bit better, just because of our experience we built.
Ian, if this last year was what you call an experience building opportunity, have you ever had these many opportunities all in one season? And if so, I'm curious about the mindset of that. What was, or maybe not just the mindset, but also what would you contribute? You said you were those bees were, so close to the end of the rope. You were just trying to hang on until we get that break in the weather. What do you attribute you and also the bees been able to hang on as long as they did?
Boy, where do I start with that one? I think I'll back that right up until when I was setting those colonies up for winter the year before that spring. When we're 150-year drought. These colonies started to set themselves up for winter too early. Like, we want our colonies to set up in around that end of August, it's into September. But because of that heat and the dryness, it just scorched the countryside. We had absolutely no food. So we ran out of honey by the end of July. Nothing coming in. Those colonies shut down. I'm like, no, this can't happen, because if they shut down now and if they don't get started up again in the fall, they're just going to die. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Mhm.
So at that point in time, we poured the coals to them. We fed them patty. I fed them 4 or 5 pounds of patty at that time, and syrup all at the same time, just to try to stimulate that nest, trying to keep that queen laying and trying to keep those nurse bees feeding that brood. And I was able to, from the end of July, I was able to extend her laying not into September, but pretty darn close to September. So I was able to pull that nest out and take it as far as I could. That was a success. I was able to do it. It's kind of like baking a cake. You just add the ingredients, you mix it together, and you build yourself some bees. You can only do that for so long, though. But I was able to build that nest, fortify their diet, really healthy looking nests. I missed one thing during that was disease control. I was monitoring for mites. I wasn't finding any mites, 0 mites. Maybe I was getting naive. Ooh, maybe I don't have mites. Maybe the conditions weren't for mites, but all those bloody bastards are underneath the cappings. So then when I built this nest, they hid under there. When the winter nest emerged, I had just this infusion of mites hit my colonies and just escalated. It's a mite explosion. And I was like, oh man. So then I started treating at that time, after the fact. But I said, well, I have to do something. So I put the strips down, and I was able to knock the mites down to a manageable level. Something really, really unusual happened right about that time. And it was directly related to the drought, but we started getting rains middle of September and into October. We didn't have a frost until almost the end of October. And because of the dryness, the farmers cut the crops. It was dry, but the roots just went into dormancy. So what happened was, when it started to rain in September, the plants started to regrow. Okay, and that's not unusual. That happens, but we had such a long, drawn-out frost into October, and the farmers are really timid to cultivate their lands. So we had all this flower and canola across the countryside, and we actually had more of a honey flow, it seemed, in October than we did all bloody July. It's just a tease. And what that did, and I think this is what caught a lot of beekeepers in Western Canada, was it took the colonies that are set up for winter, ready to go into the cold weather, and here's his warmth, here's nectar coming in, here's pollen coming in, is almost like summertime again. These colonies started to almost flip themselves out of that winter state into, summer, into production. They started brooding again. Carrie and I see this happen, and we're like, no, we don't want this to happen, because we know if we allow them to start developing into October, old man winter's going to come with an axe, whack, just like that. You know what happens to a brood nest or a colony with a young brood nest, and all of a sudden you just have it cut off just like that. Just send the colony kind of sideways and backwards and into a spiral. And not only that, but if there's any mites that were within the nest, all that brooding going on is just give these mites another opportunity then to hide again from the treatments that are going on with the beekeepers and multiply and reproduce, and then emerge later on in winter. So what Carrie and I did is we recognized this going on, and we just fed and we fed and we fed, and we kept those nests plugged out, and we did not allow that queen to start rebrooding, like igniting that nest again. So we held them tight through all that weather with lots and lots of feed. And I think we were successful with that, because we were able to hold the integrity of the nest, and we were able to get them to, when that axe dropped into winter, and they held themselves nice and tight when we put them into the shed. I am absolutely certain that's what happened to a lot of beekeepers this winter. When I'm talking to beekeepers, they've lost their colonies before they even come out of spring. And, their mites are probably in check, but they didn't anticipate the brooding, and they didn't anticipate the mites, reproducing in this late season brooding. I think there's a whole bunch of dynamics going there all at once. They'll cut a lot of guys off guard. That's just my own personal viewpoint on that. So anyways, I put these colonies into winter in pretty good shape. Winter is pretty typical up here. It's cold, windy, and right. It's just, that's what it is in Manitoba. It's just, I don't know why we live here, but typically we get out of winter by the end of March into April. April is nice enough to allow these colonies to develop. End of March, my colonies started to starve. I noticed my shed starting to drop in temperature because the colonies were basically starving. I seen an opportunity in April to get them out and to get pails onto them right away. So what Carrie and I did is we took the colonies out, we set them down, we put feed pails on them, and we got syrup into those colonies instantly. And I think we seen about 5% starvation coming in the shed at that time, and we were able to halt that. And as soon as we got the last pails on the yards, it snowed. And that's not unusual either. This is when the real trouble started. After that, we got into mild weather again. We had about three days of bee working weather, and the anticipation of just this massive Colorado low coming up. And I didn't appreciate the intensity of that system coming through. I figured, okay, maybe we'll be down for a week or whatever, and we can maybe hold these colonies through. I didn't realize we're going to be down for 3 weeks. It was just absolutely, it was cold. We were down to minus 25 again. It was 2 feet of snow. It was wind. It was not good. So those 3 days before that system come through, I made a mistake. I don't know if I made a mistake. I didn't really have a choice, but I'm looking back to see what I needed to do that I didn't do. What I did is I focused on nutrition because I wanted to focus on the development of that spring nest, which was the right answer because I was able to hold the integrity of my entire apiary through all this weather. So I made the right choice there, but I didn't have enough choice to then follow up or at the same time focus on mite control. So anything that was missed in that unusual fall lingered through the winter and started to reproduce again in the spring. And I found that because of my lack of mite control before that system went through, most of my dwindled colonies had mite presence within the nests. So I'm thinking if I would have focused more, or I don't know how I would have focused more. I needed more manpower is what I needed. Carrie and I were putting patties down and we were feeding syrup as fast as we could. Actually, we didn't get done before the system went through. We needed 1 or 2 more guys to help us just dropping strips behind us just to treat for the mites. So if I would have been able to control the mites, I would have been able to help myself manage some of that dwindle. You notice the colonies that are shaking out, they had started like 3.5 frames brood. They were only 5 or 6 frames of bees, so they were the smaller colonies anyway. But just that little bit of stress just was enough through all that stressful weather, and it just took them down like that. So I think that was a mistake I made. I should have made sure I had the treatments in there. Another thing was moving my colonies back in. And I've done it in the past. I've moved everything back into the shed to shelter them from weather, and it works really well. And other years I joke about bringing them in because it's just, move them out, move them in, move them out, move them in. It's just a terrible amount of work. Mm-hmm. But during the 3 days before that massive storm that come through, I didn't get through all my colonies, put my nukes back in the shed and another truckload of bees. I was able to feed the bees, and they stayed in there for the 3 weeks through the duration of that terrible storm. Those were my best bees. I made, my nukes were protected. They went into May just like they would any other year. And that truckload of singles I put in there, they split, let's say it was 65% I split as compared to about 25% of the rest of the apiary. Wow. So it was just night and day. The problem is I didn't have enough space. I had to have pails on top of them because they're super light. They needed the feed. So I don't know how I would have done that either. So whether that was a mistake or not is just, if I could have moved them all in, I think I would have had a better outcome at the end of it. So on reflection, that's just some of the things that I should have done or I could have done, or if I could have done, it would have made my outcome a little bit better. And as I move forward into future years, I'll just be mindful of the fact that we can't take our mites for granted, even though that we figure we have them controlled the year before. They're lingering and they're there, and going through tough conditions, you need that mite population almost at a zero. Oh, and another thing that happened was, and I think it led to the dwindle, was I had a nosema outbreak. I don't think a lot of beekeepers even test for nosema, but I noticed my nosema levels going into winter were under 1 million spore counts. Coming out of winter, about the same. But the end of that severe weather event, I had nosema levels up to that 28 million spore counts. And you guys know what nosema is all about. You know, it's just completely screws with the life cycle of the bees, all the work dynamics, and it just throws a colony into an accordion like this. So if they don't have enough girth, if they don't have enough nutrition or fortified nutrition, they can just fall apart just like that. So I think I'm maybe blaming the dwindle completely on the mites, but I think some of that has to be blamed on the nosema at the same time. So that's just a little bit of ramble about what I went through last. And then I'm not even going to talk about the damn flooding. The flooding was just icing on the cake. It made for some good YouTube videos, but holy man. That first one I went through, it was bad enough because it was a holding yard. So there's 120 that were affected there. But that second time caught me off guard when that 6.5 inches fell that night in that one specific area. And when I come to it, it was just, that was a very demoralizing moment for me. And those are my nukes. Those are my best bees. I built those bees the year before. I babied them. They made me honey. I got them through winter. I moved them out of the shed. I moved them into the shed. I fed them. I transferred them. Carrie did a lot of that work too. I'm not going to take all the credit. She did quite a bit, but these are my babies. And there I find them floating in the ditch. It was just, I don't know.
I watched that video, and it's similar. Like I watched stuff from Jose. I watched the video that Greg did this year. When that storm came through his place, and it's just that it's like that gut punch, right in that moment. But what you did, what Greg did, what Jose did, what those, real beekeepers out there are doing is you take that moment, and I've had them on my, Ian, your scale is clear out to here. I've had it in my little teeny, scale there, but you take that moment and you step back and you learn. And like you said, you prepare for the future, you come up with a plan, you execute that plan, and it worked. Your season this year, from the snow when you're walking out and you have those mountains of snow that I was just like, I don't know why anybody would live in that area, and then you had those floods come through and it was almost like just punch after punch after punch. And then the season that you had, I'm just sitting here watching it like, wow. You were talking earlier about Bob and the knowledge that he has, but don't discredit yourself, because I know there's a lot of folks in the beekeeping community, myself being one of them, really appreciate what you have to offer, the knowledge that you are putting out there in your videos, and keep up the great work.
I appreciate that. One thing you'll notice, farmers stand with pride. And one of the reasons for that is because farmers go through hardship. And after they go through the hardship, they do see reward to their work and their effort. And it feels good. And we know we worked hard. We got ourselves to this point because we put the time and effort into it. We learned from our mistakes. I mean, through my beekeeping career, I've cost myself a lot of money. I've killed a lot of bees.
Oh, man.
Trial and error, right? But at the end of it, I'm standing here looking at my colonies going into winter and knocking wood. I'm just, I don't want to sound too, maybe I'm speaking too loud. I'll just be, I'll be humbled here maybe this spring. But at the same time, I got to take in these moments when I can. I'm tipping back the colonies in their box of the bees. So I have to feel good about that. And we have to allow ourselves to feel good in these situations. Otherwise, Otherwise, we can't. I mean, we can dwell on the bad, but we also have
Right.
to give ourselves to allow ourselves to dwell in the good. Also, is what I'm trying to say. Balance it out. I'm all about balance. I
Yeah.
like to see a lot of balance to conversations and such, and everything goes part and parcel.
Absolutely. Well, Ian, we're already a half hour in almost. I'm like, man, these things go by so fast.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I especially like the part towards the end where Ian talks about how you have to be happy about the success as well as learn from the mistakes. Beekeeping can truly be challenging, but there are some really gratifying moments in beekeeping and farming in general, and that's what keeps us doing it. So if you like this type of video and you'd like to see more of it, I'd appreciate if you comment down below. Also, give me a thumbs up if you like this video to help push this content out to more people. We do these Stream Team live beekeeping chat videos on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern. We rotate between Bruce's Bees here at my channel, Nature's Image Farm with Greg Burns, and Castle Hives with Brian Coper. So if you like this type of content or you'd like to watch those videos live, you can just subscribe to the channel, and I'll be putting a community post up each week when we do those, so you'll know when they're going to go live. You can join the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat Facebook group to kind of get updates as well as to what we're doing, prizes we're going to be giving away, and things like that. So anyway, I appreciate you watching. If you want to see the full length video, the original video where Ian came on with us, you can check it out right here. Y'all take care, be safe, and we'll catch you on the next one.